Hey, I've been working on this piece for quite a while, and please pardon the jittering. I really tried to slow it down, but once this reached 22 minutes, I kind of came to the conclusion that this was probably the best I'm going to do, and I'll do my best to stabilize it out and make it a little more viewable, but this was pretty decent, especially compared to the 10-minute version. This, for those wondering what it is the final battle of my D&D campaign that I finished very recently. I went from level 1 all the way to level 20. Not everyone stuck around the whole time, but at least 2 of my players were there throughout the whole thing, and most of them were there for a very good portion. This was my first level 1 through 20 campaign, and it was an absolute experience. And I would recommend everyone to get it once if they can, and I know it's easier said than done. This is something a lot of people want to do, but it's a little difficult for many of them. It's so different than running low-level campaigns. As the DM for this one, and that's what I'm going to speak through. I'm going to speak through the lens of the DM. That's all I have access to. Running low-level campaigns versus running high-level campaigns, it requires such a change in your ideologies and how you're going to do it and how you approach things. Things that used to work before no longer work. It's so much easier to improvise and go off the cuff for smaller things. And I'll be honest, I improvised quite a bit with this campaign, and I found that was a lot harder to do in higher levels, albeit I was getting a lot better throughout this. This was a multi-year process, about 2 years. I can't remember the exact time. We missed a couple sessions, so it's probably closer to 2. But being able to improvise got harder, and while I think I got better, and in general it got easier, I definitely think I would have had more fun doing that with a lower level campaign. Of course, that isn't to knock on higher level campaigns just for that. I have plenty of other reasons to do that, but it still was so fun and interesting. And again, I highly recommend doing this at least once. I don't want to do this more than once, though. At least not in 5e. I think at this point I want to branch out a little bit. And there's a few reasons for that. I'll start with a little bit of good. Going for a high-level campaign means that the players and myself got to experience once-in-a-blue-moon uses of abilities. They got their high-level player character abilities, and I got to use super powerful monsters. It was really fun being able to do that. Go into... It was really fun being able to go into the monster manual and pull out just the strongest things and finally be able to get to use liches, demi-liches, Tarrasques, add a laser breath, get a player to come in, add paladin levels to the Tarrasque, because why not? There was so many open-ended things and things I could do, and the players could handle that. And that's a double-edged sword, because the players could handle that. It was really cool to see Chuck Chinsey, the Cavalier Fighter, chop down 30 minions outside of his own turn in one encounter. But that also meant that he could do that in a lot of other encounters. And while the encounter I designed to make sure that he got to use that ability, because I've been wanting to use that Cavalier Infinite Reactions ability myself for a bit, and seeing someone else do it was a little bit of secondhand catharsis. It was problematic, because it meant that I had to change how I threw monsters at them, because nobody could enter or leave combat with Chuck Chinsey without him getting an attack, and if he got an attack, they couldn't move unless they teleported. And now all of a sudden, in order to solve this issue, I had to give every big enemy a teleport if they had a chance to get in melee, and he would get in melee. He had a dragon pet. That may have been a problem in itself, but you know, if everything is going, come on, may as well give everybody really strong things. It just kind of happened. And, you know, maybe I could have handled magic items and all of that a little better, but I feel like the way that it was handled, they tended to get a lot more damage, which I could do easily. I could buff HP, I could add more monsters. Damage was never a problem. It was always abilities like Chuck Chinzy's magnificent infinite reaction, or the Ranger's ability to never be hit by a saving throw, because as a monster hunter, all she had to do was attack it, and if she hit, she instantly succeeded. She instantly succeeded on her saving throw. And these things are so cool to use as a player, and I'm really happy they were able to get used, but it meant that encounter design became so much more difficult. In order to combat these powerful tools that the players got, I had to give equally powerful, if not more powerful, tools to the monsters. And that could be fun, but a lot of times, in order to counter the players, my only option was to counter them in ways that weren't fun. A common thread of advice given to stop high AC, powerhouses is to throw spells like Hold Person at them, or things like Psychic Scream. And while I like to use those, and I use them a lot, you have to be careful, because when you use those on players, they just don't get to play anymore, and that's just not fun. It's not fun for the natural encounter, the natural reaction to them being strong, to be, okay, well, in this encounter, you don't get to play. And I hated being able to do that. I hated that being one of the main options. And so I tried to handle it in other ways, and I'm not going to claim that I am the absolute best, but I'm just going to say that I think I did all right. I went around and I threw as many things as I could that would play off of these powerful abilities. Trying just to think through it now. In this final encounter, for example, that Lich in the bottom left was one summoned from Orcus' staff, just off the cuff. And all he did the entire encounter until the very end, when he power word killed Chuck Chinzy, was he just disintegrated and color sprayed the rogue who had a cube of force. That was all he did, nothing else. And that was incredibly fun, actually, because as the rogue who had it, being able to see that an entire Lich was dedicating their entire life to just stopping the one magic item that was stopping a ton of things from happening, was probably incredibly satisfying. I hope it was satisfying. That was the goal. And things were just finding a good way to segue into this. It's not all fun and games seeing players get to high level. It's fun in games in the very literal sense that this is a game and it was very fun. But it's a double-edged sword to have these large and powerful abilities. It makes encounter design a lot more difficult. And in a lot of issues, it can just turn previously fun problems into... It solves them. It takes what were previously challenges that were fun to go through, and it's like, oh, this is no longer a challenge. This is solved. We don't need to worry about this anymore. And the biggest culprit that I point to this is rogues. Rogues, expertise, and reliable talent. It's a combo that's incredibly powerful and incredibly exciting to get. And I'm going to say this a second time, incredibly powerful, because it allows them to succeed on every skill check. Like, not actually. You can still throw stuff at them that challenges them. You can still find ways to get past that and make checks that they can't succeed at. But the issue is that when you're doing that, you lose the ability to have those same skills used for the other players, because only the rogue is going to be able to do that now. You are creating a problem specifically for the rogue to do. And these problems you have to find a reason to do them. These are, magical locks that are protecting extremely powerful artifacts with the super chest of ancient times past that the dying king once had enchanted to protect. Everything has to become that in order to provide a reasonable challenge. And you can still throw easy challenges at them, low DCs. And this goes for any character at this. You can throw things that they'll solve easily, and that's really fun to be able to be like, hey, at level 3 and 4 we struggled to do this, but now look we have like this one spell or one ability and we just solve it instantly. And that's really cool once or twice. Once you start getting more than that, it just becomes repetitive. And that's difficult to throw off the cuffs encounters that don't dip into this territory. And the problem is that I really like to throw off the cuff encounters. I like it when they're, the players go to a tavern and now they're Jackie Chan style. They're struggling to get whatever random MacGuffin is there. And it doesn't have to be the most powerful thing. Maybe it's just the last drink in the bar and everybody's trying to get that. And at high levels, you can't have things like that. Like, you still kind of can, but you need all these high-level NPCs and all these things to be met in order for it to be kind of challenging. Or maybe you try to challenge it between the players, but the issue is that the players' tools are so powerful in regards to each other, and there's not a lot of creativity to play off of that. It's a rock, paper, scissors design. And 5e is littered with this. Things that are like, here's a problem. In order to solve this problem, you need the solution. And then it will give you a solution in terms of a lot of things. A lot of player character features, you get poisoned and that poison is going to kill you. Oh, the cleric can get I forget which one removes poison, because I think protection from poison also removes poison. I don't know. I'm not looking at this stuff right now, and I'm too busy talking to look up rules. But the thing is that this rock, paper, scissors design inherently stifles creativity, in my opinion, because it runs into these issues where you can't throw tools, or you can't throw abilities, or you can't do these things because you're like, the players do not have a way to solve this. And you can give them a way to solve it, but then all of a sudden they're following this predetermined path in order to... They fall into the problem, now here's the way to solve it. Like, if you poison them with an incredibly debilitating poison that paralyzes them, yeah, sure, they can wait for the con save, and there's some things you can do there, but the easiest solution is to, remove the poison. And in order to do that, there's a bunch of tools that do it, but then the problem's just solved. And this is a very simplified example. There's a lot more complicated ones that I don't have prepared at the moment. I only did a little bit of writing to try and prepare this so I wasn't totally off the cuff. And the issue with this kind of design is that it makes it so that it's more difficult to come up with creative solutions. It's more difficult to throw random things at the party unless they'll have a fun time solving this. Because, I can paralyze the fighter. I can make the encounter more challenging, but that doesn't make it more fun, because now the player character who runs Chuck Shinsey, his turn comes up, what are you doing? I'm paralyzed. Make the save. 13. Okay. That's your turn. It's complicated, is how I'm going to put it. 5e doesn't give the players a ton of features that have creative uses. Like, low levels, it does great with this. Like, for example, Featherfall. You look at that and it's like, that just removes falling as an entire threat. Now, you can't throw falling as a threat to players, but that's not quite true. Yeah, sure, it gets rid of falling as a threat for what I'll say is a reasonable cost of a spell slot known. But at the same time, now that they have Featherfall, they have a ton of options for things that they couldn't do before. The player with Featherfall can be like, hey, we can engage on these enemies by jumping off a cliff onto them. We couldn't do that before, now we can. Or, hey, scaling this cliff would have just been dumb beforehand. There was no safety net, nothing to do, but now we can at least try. And Featherfall, in my opinion, solves a problem while creating... Let's face it, creating more problems, because when the players inevitably jump on them and realize, hey, wait, we don't have an escape, that's kind of fun and an issue, and something that they're going to have to think up of now that they've gone with an, in hindsight, awful plan. It's high-level encounter design doesn't have this. Reliable talent. It's like, what is that? What problems does it solve? Well, low DCs cannot be failed anymore. You always succeed. There is no point in rolling. You will always succeed anything below a 25 or whatever is 10 plus their mod. And that, there's an argument to be made that it's like, now that you've you've increased the minimum they can roll, now there's a lot more reasons to go for things that they couldn't normally do. They can go for things that previously, like stealthing through an entire compound. It's like, hey, that would have gotten them killed before, but now they have a reasonable chance of success. And that's true. There's an argument to be made there. But at the same time, I feel like it takes away so much of the rest of the game to give this. I feel like there were so many other ways that you could have made a mechanic like this or tried to give them that sort of benefit for things that they're really good at, like without actually just removing the challenge entirely of other encounters and making what were previously challenges into things that are just, oh, it just happens. There's no point in rolling to stealth past the town guard. Even if you roll a natural 1 and he rolls a 20, you still beat him. And this type of thing tends to happen a lot. Like, even with HP, that happens. It's like, oh, players at high level, they have 300 HP. You know, the barbarian has 300 HP. The fighter might have like 2 something. The wizards will have 100 something. But they have a lot of hit points. It's like, oh, well, you don't even need Featherfall now. And besides, you have like 100 tools that can solve that. You just, if you fall off the thing, you just take some damage. And oh, what's the big deal? It's just a little bit of damage now. And this is fun to do once or twice. It's not fun when the challenge is just gone. When you're inherently limited. And again, there's ways to go around this, but I didn't like it. I mean, I loved it. I loved running the campaign. It was so much fun, but I didn't like these limitations. I love a much more grounded game. I love being able to run off-the-cuff things with little stakes that are actually challenging, or maybe they have high stakes, but they're still actually challenging for just, I don't want to say realism, because it's not quite realism, but I like there being a danger present. And a lot of times with these, there's a danger present, but, you know, at the very end of the encounter, Chuck Shinzi, they had Death Ward. He had to get Power Word killed twice to die, and he did. But then afterwards, he just got resurrected. And then I threw a couple other things that played off of that, but that has to be meticulously planned. There's so much planning that has to go into that sort of thing to actually offer a challenge, and it's just not my style. I loved it, but I'm not planning on doing it again. Not in 5e. I will gladly play 5e for much smaller things. Levels 1 through 11 in 5e, they're so great. You can still throw challenges at your players. A level 11 party has strengths and weaknesses, but the weaknesses aren't so debilitating that using them against your party isn't going to destroy them. They're the same exact strength as high level, but now everyone else doesn't have things to just instantly solve those weaknesses. You can, give them disadvantage, which loses a lot of its steam at high levels because the way that 2-hit bonus works, even if the fighter has disadvantage, with a +3 weapon and their large 2-hit bonuses, they're probably going to hit even with disadvantage against an AC 25. It becomes a little silly. But at levels 1 through 11, they have weaknesses, they have strengths, and you can play off those weaknesses and strengths a lot easier. It's so much easier to go off of it. And a lot of times you can just be like, oh, the fighter, well, I'm just going to throw 1 or 2 more melee-orientated guys. Now, him getting into melee is a little more risky, and he's going to do it still, but they have to be more careful, and they can't, take some more risks. Maybe the other casters have to focus on keeping them a little more protected. Because at that level, even though the fighter getting knocked out is a bad thing, you don't have to throw 5 million guys at them. That would instantly overrun everyone else if the front line goes down. It's just a lot more fun, in my opinion, to run lower level games. And again, this was an experience. I would highly advise everyone do this at least once, if they can, because it was different. Getting those high level abilities at least once was fun. I'm not going to deny it. It was really fun to see all these things happen, to see the druid who I gave Meteor Swarm, because trust me, that was less problematic than True Polymorph. Him using Meteor Swarm in the final encounter and half-healthing just everybody, that was fun to see. And I could solve that encounter. I could give healing. I could increase health. That was just an experience and a level of power that that player had that may not happen for a long time. And that's an experience. And that's the reason you want to run this. You want to see those things. You want to see them fight liches and Tarrasques. And even if it gets stale after a little bit, if you, keep take your time going through levels 1 and 11 and then go through the 11 through 20 a little quicker, I think that's the ideal way to handle this and to handle 5e in general, perhaps. But again, I don't think I want to run 5e 1 through 20 again. It was fun. It was an experience, but I think I've had my fill of that. I want to branch out. I want to try new systems. And recently, I've really been liking Savage Worlds. That's a system that I think solves a lot of these things, and it has its own problems, and I'm sure I'll discover those as I go through, but it solves a lot of these issues. Players are encouraged to diversify their skill set instead of focusing down on one ability that they have. Players, when they level up, they don't necessarily get a ton of HP to solve encounters by just taking through. You have the same amount of HP at every single level, and you can be harder to hit and hurt, but you still have the same amount of HP. Minions in the system have the ability to take you out in theoretically one shot. It's not going to happen. The dice are against them. And quite frankly, I think a random minion taking out one of the heroes in one shot isn't fun. And so I implement homebrew rules to limit the type of damage that they can do. But that's so much more interesting to me. That's a system that I feel I want to try to high level. And this is the end. This took 35 hours of work, by the way. This was something, it took a long time and it was an experience. Just like running a level 1 through 20 campaign. Oh my goodness. I don't want to stare at this for too long, though, for fear of becoming too self-absorbent. And I want to, on this final note, I think I want to just say a few things about the campaign I'm planning on running. Because, I'm planning on making it a homebrew thing. I'm using Savage Worlds, but I'm not using one of their own systems. Savage Worlds is like the base system that and you can get a bunch of settings that have their own rules and powers and stuff to use. And I'm planning on making my own homebrew thing and releasing that free to the public. I feel like anyone should be able to use that. It's going to be pretty fun. It is a sci-fi themed campaign with magic. It's set in the Milky Way, which I chose because milkmen play a role. They are the MDS, the Milk Delivery Service, is a courier service, and the only real one in the Wild West colonization of space. And they're really important to keeping things running. Of course, they deliver milk, and milk takes the form of healing potions in the campaign. But they're also basically secret agents. They are the Texas Rangers of the Wild West of space. And it is so silly. And, of course, you have magic. And I've already run the first session in this. The players crash-landed on a planet with their super magical spaceship. It's like space jamming combined. And I don't think I could do it justice in the short time here. If you're interested, I am planning on releasing the entire modules that I'm using. I'm homebrewing it, adding a ton of races, some content. And it's not going to be the best. It's going to be, first edition, first draft. Maybe later on I'll make a much better version after playing the campaign for a while. But that'll be completely available with setting specific details. I have a world anvil running to describe as much of the campaign as I can. And I'm also planning on recording the actual campaign itself. We've run the first session. I've recorded it. I've already messed up. I forgot to record like half of the first half, like a quarter of the session of my own mic volume because I'm handling everything and I'm an idiot. So I'm going to literally redub over that and just redub over myself being silent as best as I can just because I want to get that out there. Not really because I think it's going to be successful here. I don't necessarily think a ton of people are going to watch it. I just want to do it. It's fun. excited for the campaign. I really feel like it's an interesting thing. I feel like I'm going to have fun running it, making stuff for it. In the previous campaign too, there's a ton of stories that I might want to do here, and I just want to do them. So I do think you should expect more stuff on my channel in general, because I just want to put more stuff out there. I'm super pumped, super motivated to get as much out there as I can, and I have been for the last month, if you can't tell by the fact that I spent 35 hours on a single speed paint that I'm sure like 100 people are going to see, which actually is surprising. That's still a lot of people, and I'm slightly baffled that, even some of my other stuff get like 80 views. But it's not a ton, but it's fun. And I just want to keep doing this kind of thing. Anyway, I'm just rambling on here and wasting time. I really hope I had some insights here that were useful to you, and I hope that you were able to take something out of this. And with that, happy frickin' gaming. And goodbye.